You know that feeling, that heaviness. It settles in your chest before you even open your eyes. Another morning, the same storm running through your mind. The thoughts rush in fast. You're failing, you're falling behind, you're not enough. You tell yourself it's temporary. You act like you're okay, but deep inside, something keeps burning. And here's the truth most people avoid saying. Most people aren't truly living. They're reacting to fear, suffocating under anxiety, carrying anger they never learned to understand. You were taught to battle your emotions, to bury them, to look strong while quietly breaking apart. But what if that's the real mistake? What if everything you were taught about controlling your mind is backwards? Stoicism never taught us to escape emotion. It taught us to face it clearly, to strip away illusion, to stop confusing thoughts with reality. You have power over your mind, not outside events. So why do we spend our lives trying to fix the external world while neglecting the inner one completely? This video isn't here to soothe you, it's here to confront you, because until you face what controls you, freedom will stay out of reach. If you're ready to stop reacting and start thinking with intention, subscribe. For the version of you that refuses to be ruled by chaos anymore, this is the first step toward reclaiming inner calm. Let's begin. Fear doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it's subtle. It doesn't shout. It hums quietly in the background, disguising itself as caution or overthinking. It settles into your choices, shaping what you say, what you tolerate, and what you walk away from without a word. It convinces you that staying silent is safer than speaking up, that waiting is smarter than trying, that avoidance is better than failure, and so you don't make the call, you avoid the conversation, you never take the first step. You hesitate just long enough for chances to disappear, for connections to fade, for dreams to gather dust. All the while, fear whispers that it's protecting you from pain, embarrassment, disappointment, but in reality, it's protecting you from becoming who you're meant to be. Over time, you stop needing reasons to say no. It becomes automatic. You start calling it your personality, but it isn't who you are. It's who fear has trained you to become. That's the tragedy. Most people don't realize it until years have passed, until regret replaces hope. They look back and wonder how life became so small, so predictable, so painfully safe. Fear works like that. It never introduces itself as fear. It says you're not ready yet. It says wait for the right moment. But that moment never comes, because fear makes sure it doesn't. You start measuring life by what you preserved instead of what you experienced. You protect comfort, pride, image, but lose momentum, depth, and joy. Fear doesn't just steal action, it steals aliveness. The kind that comes from doing things that quicken your pulse and expand your mind. Fear offers you a quiet life, and if you're not careful, you'll accept it and call it peace. But it isn't peace, it's paralysis. The shift doesn't begin by pretending fear isn't there. It begins the moment you admit it exists, when you look at it honestly and ask what it's really trying to protect you from. That question weakens its grip. Because most fear isn't about real danger, it's about imagined threat. And that threat is almost always emotional. Rejection, looking foolish, being misunderstood, none of those will destroy you. What destroys people is the slow ache of a life unlived, the weight of wondering what could have been. Fear never warns you about that. It never tells you that avoiding failure also means avoiding growth, that protecting your image can cost you your authenticity, that by avoiding disappointment, you end up disappointing yourself quietly and repeatedly. Fear isn't the villain. It isn't even the enemy. It's a messenger. And when you stop running from it and actually listen, it often has something important to reveal. Listening doesn't mean obeying. It means understanding. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can carry it without letting it lead. When fear goes unchecked, it becomes the master. It writes the limits. It defines the script. And the longer it stays in control, the more you believe life is supposed to feel heavy, cautious, tense. But it isn't. That's just what happens when fear becomes your default. You don't need to erase fear. You need to change your relationship with it. You need to notice when it speaks and learn to separate its voice from yours. You are not the fear. You are the one hearing it. That distance between impulse and action is where power lives. That space is what allows you to pause, observe, and choose. And it grows the moment you stop calling fear weakness and start seeing it as a teacher. Every fear points to something meaningful, something you care about, something unhealed, or something you're meant to step into. Growth always feels like fear at first. That's how you know you're near something real. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action taken despite it. And no, it won't feel comfortable. It may feel terrifying. But beneath that discomfort is energy, movement, possibility. You'll never outrun fear, but you can stop running from it. When you turn and face it, it often shrinks, loses its grip, loses its permanence. More often than not, you realize the thing you feared was never real, just a story, a shadow, something that grew stronger only because it went unchallenged. When you meet fear with awareness and ask what it's trying to teach, you reclaim control. You stop living under its rule. You begin to feel movement again. And from movement comes momentum. That's how freedom begins, not with a dramatic leap, but with a quiet truth. The moment you say, "I'm afraid, but I'm moving anyway," your life is too valuable to be directed by shadows, and the only way to live fully is to stop letting fear decide for you. We've been conditioned to believe there are only two ways to deal with anger: explode or suppress, say something you'll regret, or say nothing and regret it later. But both paths keep you trapped because they come from the same root: disconnection. Disconnection from the message inside the anger. Because anger is a message. It doesn't come from weakness. It comes from something inside you saying this isn't okay. It's the signal of a crossed boundary, a violated value. But if you never slow down enough to hear it, anger mutates. It turns into resentment, bitterness, passive aggression, and eventually exhaustion. You can only carry that tension for so long before it begins breaking you down. Most people live with quiet anger. Anger they don't even realize they're holding. Anger that started years ago and never found release. It shows up in overreactions, in unexplained distrust, in the tightness you feel when certain memories surface. And because no one teaches us to examine it, we normalize it. We label it personality. We say, "That's just how I am," but it isn't who you are. It's what you haven't released. And more importantly, what you haven't yet understood. Seneca once wrote that anger, when left unrestrained, often harms us more than the event that triggered it. And that's the real tragedy. The damage caused by unchecked anger is usually worse than the original wound. Not because anger itself is wrong, but because it's powerful. And anything powerful that isn't understood becomes dangerous. You don't need to fear your anger. You need to become curious about it. You need to ask, what part of me is hurting? What expectation was broken? What fear is hiding beneath this fire? Because at its core, anger is pain without a voice. It's vulnerability that put on armor to survive. But armor doesn't only protect, it also isolates. And when you live armored, you lose connection, not just with others, but with yourself. So what does it mean to approach anger differently? It means pausing, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to hold the fire without throwing it. It means allowing the feeling to rise, without letting it take control. It means not sending the message, not raising your voice, not reacting until you've asked the deeper questions. Sometimes it means sitting with discomfort long enough for the real story to surface. Anger always carries a story, and when you listen fully, it often transforms into something else. Clarity, sadness, grief, even compassion. That doesn't mean you excuse what happened. It means you stop letting it live inside your body unchecked. There's a quiet strength in someone who feels deeply but responds with wisdom. Someone who can walk away instead of explode, who can speak truth without cruelty, who can hold tension without passing it on. That isn't weakness, that's mastery. And it's built moment by moment, breath by breath, in the space between trigger and reaction. That pause is everything. It's where choice is born. It's where you stop being controlled by emotion and start guiding it. Carl Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to understanding ourselves. That's the invitation anger offers. Not just to blame, but to see, to look inward, to uncover the part of you that still hurts, still longs, still remembers. The more honest you are with that part, the less power anger has over you, and the more capacity you gain to respond with depth instead of impulse. You won't always succeed. Sometimes the fire will win. But every time you pause instead of explode, every time you question instead of assume, every time you choose understanding over reaction, you build something rare, emotional discipline, and with it, a deeper freedom. The kind that doesn't depend on the world behaving a certain way for you to feel at peace. The kind that allows you to feel the flame without being consumed by it. Anxiety works differently. It's quiet, but convincing. It doesn't shout. It whispers just loudly enough to make you doubt yourself. It pretends to help by offering control. It wraps itself in logic, caution, responsibility. It tells you to think one more time, to prepare for the worst, just in case. And it sounds like you. That's why it's so persuasive. It doesn't feel foreign, it feels reasonable. But beneath that calm voice is fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of falling apart. Anxiety convinces you that by analyzing every possibility, you're staying ahead. But in reality, you're spinning in circles, draining your energy, rehearsing pain that hasn't happened. It starts small, a forgotten task, a strange look, an upcoming deadline. Before you notice, your heart is racing, your mind is buzzing, and you're nowhere near the present moment. You replay conversations that haven't happened. You anticipate failure. You imagine worst-case outcomes, all while the real moment passes you by. You're not solving anything. You're bracing for something vague, something undefined, something you can feel, but can't clearly name. And because you feel it, you assume it must be real. That's the trap. Feelings are not facts. They are experiences, not evidence. And anxiety is one of the most convincing experiences the mind can produce. Anxiety steals this moment from you. It takes your presence, your clarity, your sense of control. And the hardest part is you allow it, believing it's protecting you. But it isn't. It's convincing you that every thought deserves attention, that every worry is a warning. Most aren't. Most are echoes, old patterns, familiar fears, thoughts repeated so often they start to feel true. But if you examine them closely, you'd see what they really are. Thoughts, not predictions, not commands, just mental noise pretending to be important. You don't need to debate every anxious thought. You don't need to solve every imagined future. You need to return to what's in front of you, to the rhythm of your breath, to the ground beneath your feet, to the task in your hands. That's how peace is reclaimed, not by fixing the future, but by anchoring yourself in the present. Because this moment is where your life is actually happening. This moment is where your power lives. And the more often you return to it, the weaker anxiety becomes. Not because it vanishes, but because it no longer decides for you. Anxiety wants you to believe that constant thinking equals preparation. But the truth is, constant thinking delays living. The mind is a brilliant servant, but a dangerous master. When anxiety takes the lead, it doesn't guide you forward. It traps you in loops. The same fears replayed in endless variations, none of them bringing clarity or peace. Peace doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from learning to live without needing them, from trusting that you can handle what comes when it comes. That trust isn't built in thought. It's built through experience, by stepping into uncertainty and realizing it didn't destroy you, by facing discomfort and surviving it, by living through what once scared you and discovering you're still here. Courage, especially in the face of anxiety, isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act anyway. It's showing up for your life when your mind tells you to hide. You don't owe anxiety every moment of your day. You don't need to answer every what if. You don't need to fix every outcome. Sometimes you just need to breathe, stay present, and let the thought pass. And it will pass when you stop feeding it attention. The more grounded you become in the present, the quieter anxiety grows, not because it disappears, but because it loses authority. And that's all it ever needed to lose its grip: your permission. Take it back, return to now, let the rest unfold in its time. You are not your emotions. This truth can change everything, but it isn't easy to learn. We've all been there, caught in shame, overwhelmed by fear, consumed by anger. Each emotion feels so intense, so convincing, that it's easy to believe it defines us. Shame after a mistake tells you you are broken. Fear before a risk whispers danger. Anger tells you to fight. And suddenly, these emotions don't just pass through you, they become your identity. You start believing that feeling angry means you are anger. Feeling anxious means you are anxiety. You treat emotions as commands instead of signals. But emotions aren't facts. They are indicators. They point toward something deeper happening inside you. When you treat them as truth instead of messages, you hand them control over your actions, your choices, your sense of worth. We live in a world obsessed with positivity, telling us to avoid discomfort, to eliminate negative feelings. But what if the goal isn't to avoid emotion? What if the goal is to experience it without being defined by it? What if sadness, anxiety, and anger aren't weaknesses, but proof that you're alive, that you care, that you're human? These emotions are natural. They don't need suppression. They need understanding. If you've ever been overwhelmed by emotion, you're not weak. You're human. You're experiencing life fully. And that isn't failure. It's an invitation to grow. This doesn't mean you'll never feel these emotions again. It means they won't control you. You'll let them move through you like weather across the sky, present but no longer in charge. You are the one who chooses how to respond. That's where freedom lives, not in a life without emotion, but in a life where emotion doesn't dictate your thoughts, actions, or identity. It's easy to get lost in what you feel, easy to believe emotion equals identity. But the truth is, you are far more than any feeling you experience. Your emotions are part of you. They are not who you are. They don't get to decide who you are or how you live. That choice has always been yours. And the moment you truly understand that, you stop being ruled by your emotions. You stop reacting blindly and begin responding with awareness and intention. That's when real change begins. Not because emotions disappear, but because you rise above them. Feeling anger, fear, or shame doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. And that's not a flaw, that's a gift. The real strength appears when you understand that emotions are signals, not orders. When you realize you are the sky, not the storm passing through it. That awareness allows you to reclaim your life, your calm, and your ability to choose how you move through adversity. That is where true strength is born. Much of our suffering comes from a single illusion, the belief that if we try hard enough, we can control everything. We try to manage people, their reactions, their opinions. We attempt to control our own thoughts, forcing them down or reshaping them into what we think they should be. We try to control the future by imagining every possible outcome, hoping preparation will protect us. But here's the hard truth. You can't control any of it. No matter how much effort you invest, there will always be forces beyond your reach. The weather, traffic, a stranger's rude remark, none of that belongs to you. Yet we spend enormous energy gripping things that were never ours to hold, and in the process, we exhaust ourselves. The Stoics understood this deeply. These were people who lived through wars, plagues, and the collapse of entire empires. They knew control was an illusion, and once that illusion falls away, something powerful happens. You stop wasting energy on what you can't change and start investing it where it matters. The Stoics didn't chase control, they chased clarity. They understood that the only things truly within their control were their thoughts, their choices, and their actions. What others say or do isn't yours. How the world behaves isn't yours. But how you respond to it always has been. And when you take responsibility for your response, you reclaim the most powerful tool you possess, your mind. Your power was never meant to control the world around you. It lives in how you relate to it. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. When you stop trying to manage the uncontrollable and focus instead on what you can influence, you begin to experience a freedom you've never known. We're taught to believe we should be able to fix everything, our work, our relationships, our future. But chasing control over what isn't yours only leads to frustration and burnout. Traffic will still slow you down, difficult people will still exist, but your response to them is the one place where your power remains intact. That choice is always yours. You can react and let life push you around, or you can respond with intention. Even when everything feels chaotic, you are not powerless. You've just been spending your power in the wrong direction. If you keep handing that power to the outside world, letting circumstances dictate how you feel, you stay trapped in stress and resentment. But when you reclaim it and turn inward, focusing on your thoughts, your actions, your responses, your life begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start becoming the architect of your experience. With practice, you realize something profound. The external world doesn't need to change for you to feel at peace. You can move through the storm without losing your balance. You can face chaos and remain grounded. When you release the need to control everything, you create space. Space for calm, space for clarity, space for wisdom. The key is simple. Stop resisting what you can't control and start committing to what you can, your response. That's where your strength lives. That's the shift from being controlled by life to consciously shaping how you experience it. When this understanding settles in, everything looks different. The small annoyances no longer consume you. Traffic, rude comments, daily inconveniences become opportunities to practice response instead of reaction. You stop waiting for permission from the world to feel at peace. You stop believing that one perfect moment will arrive and finally allow you to relax. The truth is, there is no perfect moment. There is only now. And in this moment, you always have a choice. When you focus on what you can control, your mind, your actions, your reactions, you begin living on your own terms. External events lose their grip on your happiness. You stop chasing peace and start creating it. This isn't about ignoring difficulty. It's about recognizing your ability to rise above it. So stop draining your energy trying to control everything. Turn inward. That's where your power has always been. Now it's time to claim it. Mastering the mind doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process built from small moments, tiny decisions, and subtle shifts in how you meet life. We often think change requires a dramatic transformation, but real change starts quietly. When you stop reacting automatically and begin engaging with your inner world consciously, you don't have to fix everything today. You don't need all the answers right now. You don't need to overhaul your mindset in a single moment. What you need is a choice to pause instead of react, a choice to breathe before speaking, a choice to observe emotion rather than obey it. Each small decision compounds. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress, and progress begins when you stop fighting your emotions and start understanding them. Fear will appear, it always does. It doesn't ask permission, it doesn't announce itself. It slips in quietly. But when it arrives, you don't need to run. You don't need to escape the feeling. Instead, listen, let it speak, and ask yourself one honest question. Why am I afraid? What is this fear really pointing to? You may not control the fear itself, but you always control how you meet it. And the moment you stop running from it, its grip begins to weaken. You don't have to act on every fear. Sometimes simply acknowledging it is enough. The same is true with anger. When anger goes unexamined, it pushes us to react in ways we later regret. It rises fast, urging us to speak or act without awareness. But what if instead of exploding, you paused? What if before anger decided your words or actions, you stopped, took a breath, and reflected? That small pause is where transformation begins. Anger, like fear, is a signal. It's an internal message saying something needs attention. But it is not an order to act impulsively. Anger can become useful when you choose understanding over eruption. Carl Jung once said that until the unconscious is made conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This insight is central to breaking free from emotional autopilot. When reactions run your life, you are living unconsciously. Fear, anger, and anxiety begin making decisions for you without your awareness. But the moment you choose to pause, to observe, to consciously respond, you reclaim control. This is where you stop calling your life fate. This is where you take your mind back. Power does not come from controlling every thought or emotion. It comes from noticing them as they arise and choosing how to respond. This is where mastery truly begins. Not by eliminating difficult emotions, but by learning to sit with them, understand them, and act from clarity instead of impulse. You don't need to stop feeling fear, anger, or anxiety. You need to stop letting them run your life. Emotions are not commands, they are signals. And when you learn to observe those signals without immediately reacting, you create space for better choices. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. It's like strengthening a muscle. Every pause builds your capacity to respond instead of react. Every moment of awareness over impulse forms a new habit. Over time, these small shifts turn into lasting change. You don't need a dramatic event to begin. Change starts now. With a single breath before reacting, with one pause before speaking, that's enough to start. As you practice this, you'll notice something important. Your life begins to change, not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you engage with it differently. You stop operating on habit and start living with awareness. That's where real power lives. Not in controlling what happens to you, but in choosing how you meet it. Mastery of the mind isn't about denying emotion or pretending fear and anger don't exist. It's about understanding that these emotions do not define you. They do not control you. They are simply part of being human. And when you learn to observe them, to pause, and to choose your response, you step into your real strength. Remember this: you don't need to fix everything today. You don't need all the answers right now. All you need is the smallest step toward mastery. A slight shift in how you respond to the world. One pause, one breath, one conscious choice. In those moments, you discover the power to change your life. You shape your life not by controlling everything around you, but by choosing how you respond to it. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you aren't just changing behavior, you're changing direction. This is your journey, your growth, and it begins with the smallest shift. Thank you for being part of Stoic Journal. If you're ready to go deeper into mastering your mind and living with intention, check out the next video on your screen. Keep growing, keep choosing, keep living with purpose.